All right. Just a little bit of adjustment here. How's that? So, so I got a lot to go over today, and I have a tendency to ramble, so I'm trying to keep that at a minimum. Um, but I do need to address some stuff from the previous episode. I've had a couple people ask me some stuff. So it has to do with my medical condition, and I'm not going to go into it today because obviously we're talking about other stuff. The stuff I feel I need to talk about more so than that. The personal stuff I don't think is as relevant uh, to humanity. Perhaps they might learn something from it, but my purpose is to teach other things. But I will go over the questions that were asked. First of all, I appreciate all the feedback I got on my video previously. I know it wasn't so much in the form of comments, but I have had a couple of friends and family reach out and tell me what they liked about them and stuff. My son, my youngest, says I need to do some editing, and he's a YouTube pro when it comes to being a connoisseur, as it were. Kid watches quite a bit of YouTube, like most kids do nowadays. We try to keep it under wraps, but the world as it is nowadays, it makes it a little rough. We're all kind of stuck indoors most of the time nowadays. See what I said about the rambling? There it is. All right, so, anyways, to talk about that situation, some of the questions that have been asked were whether or not, I was going to die or anything like that, or if I feel like I'm going to. Is that if that's the case? Let me explain it like this. I don't know. I don't know that. I don't know much about what's going on with me. And that's part of what I'm trying to get some tests done to figure out, where I sit with that. However, I'm feeling different. And because I feel different, have just become concerned that my ability to express myself is bound to become limited at some point. Whether that's I get surgery again to get my thyroid done because I had that once before. Used to be a great singer. Now I can't hit the notes like I could. It's real painful when I get to the upper register. So I am very limited in my capacity to do that now. And I feel like at some point I might not as much be able to speak or express myself, at least as well as I can now. So I feel that it's more urgent, at least, that I, you know, say what I gotta say when I got the chance to. I'm a procrastinator and a perfectionist, and I know my health situation doesn't look like that, but you'll often find people with those problems, OCD and stuff like that. They tend to channel their stuff towards a certain thing being perfect and let all the rest of it go to crap. So that's pretty much my nature, and I'm aware of that. So that also is another reason why I've been so gung ho all of these past few years about working on my paper, even though it seems like the sort of thing that is a silly thing. I think that most people would think that some dude working in a hotel thinking he's writing a science paper is silly. Like, especially if they didn't, you know, uh, I don't know. I'm just thinking about it as like a narrative, like from a TV movie, like from the perspective of I'm looking at my situation, Jeremiah, and I'm an outside observer at the situation, thinking to myself that, it's what the storyline of that would be. I'm looking at the situation Jeremiah is in from an outside observer and being like, okay, how would Jeremiah's story pan out from here. What would the people in his immediate vicinity act like and and think and say about the things that he's thinking and saying and doing? Like a storyteller. That's what I went to college for. So I have a tendency to think like that, kind of think ahead in that manner, where I kind of think of it almost like a character in a movie or a show and predict the outcome of events through the likelihood of that archetype of character's behavior, if that makes any sense. And so I have a tendency to do that. And when I'm doing that about my situation, the way that I see or think that people might feel about me writing a scientific paper is that they would think perhaps me, some of my close friends and people like that would be like, oh, cool, yeah, and interested in that. People that are close to me, they think, oh, yeah, he's a smart guy. Or, my mom, she's all proud of me and stuff. She'd say I'm smart and stuff like that. But you know what I mean? Like, it's the sort of thing that you can't know unless you talk to someone that is or does know that sort of stuff. And that being the case, you know, there's always the chance with people when they get real overzealous about smart guy stuff is that they, you know, have the Dunning Kruger effect thing. We've seen that happen with the whole Terrence Howard situation recently in the media when he ended up on the Joe Rogan podcast. And that I when it comes to that guy, I admire like his courage in speaking out. But at the same time, I feel like some of his stuff is like he's overzealous a little bit, and that sort of stuff scares anybody away. If someone's going and shouting some crazy stuff about something that they read and they just like that's the thing is a lot of these people they'll just read something, they get their information and then they just pump it right back out. They start believing it, feel like they understand it, they add it to their reasoning and then they start preaching the thing and get online and start talking about it. And not a lot of people, it seems, in my opinion, do much of kind of what I do, research the topic from different angles with different sources and put it all like together. And you'll see what I mean by that because I'm about to show you in the next couple episodes how I operate and what it is that I do when I do my research and what I'm talking about when I'm trying to explain these things to you guys, like the theory that I have. And that's going to be a fun part. You guys stick around for that. That's going to be great. But this episode right here that we're doing has, it's kind of like the intro to that. It's not going to be really so much the meat and potatoes of it. It's going to be sort of a learning primer, I guess we'll say. So, that being said, I guess to wrap that up, really all I was saying is I don't think that at this moment any of us have anything to worry about with Jair's health. Like I'm getting it looked into. I have appointments set up for that sort of thing. I'm um, certainly have a zest for life. I'm gonna try my best and be doing everything I need to do when it comes to the doctor stuff. That being said, today when I went to my appointment, the thing is that I kind of laughed when I was in there, and I think it made the doctor feel uncomfortable, like the things that I laughed at. But I kept laughing at things that were ironic, I felt. And one of the things that seemed ironic was the fact that, like, I found out that I did my research a little bit on the cancer, and it's pretty fast when it hits, especially if it gets into like some of the bad places, right? So, so I know that time is of the essence, sort of situation, right? And then, like when it came to insurance stuff, uh, in order for me to qualify for certain scans and stuff to find out about it, like an MRI specifically, I think it is, I need to jump through like a crap ton of hoops to even make that happen. And one of the things is like therapy that I have to do for like, I think it's 6 to 8 weeks or something to try to get like the neck problems that I have gone or fixed or whatever. So yeah, I laughed at that because I thought it was ironic, like time is of the essence sort of thing, and the insurance company is like, nah, man. Like I don't know. Uh, it seems like a system built to slowly bleed us all dry, and I think we all know that's pretty much true. But that's what we're looking to fix. That's what we're looking to fix with this these propositions, these things I'm going to be talking about, and the world changing events, hopefully, that will happen. Um, I talked at length at what I wanted to do when it comes to like the uh, Little Red Hen Foundation and stuff like that in the previous episode. But what we all gotta wonder, what the heck is it that I feel like gives us the upper hand that we could do something like that? What would make that possible? And obviously you would need to have something like that. And because outside of just a miracle happening where all of a sudden everybody in the world just it clicked for them and we all connected and it was just peaceful and everybody did their part to bring us all together, and we all know that the likelihood of something like that, just all of a sudden an epiphany hitting the world and all of us just hitting the straight and narrow, is the sort of thing that is not a very good likelihood. You know, I don't want to say impossible. My grandfather, may he rest in peace, I loved him dearly, used to say, apparently, this is something my mom used to tell me. He used to say, nothing is impossible, only impreparable, which is a word which means really hard to do. And so I don't really like to deem things as impossible. However, you know, in a world of dualities, what is possible without that which is impossible? It's a paradox, huh? So, anyways, uh, so part of my plan is to remove need and the benefiting from need. If we were to fix things in this world, the only way that we could do that is to make it so that nobody is able to profit from need anymore. Want, people can profit from want all they want. That's where the capitalism lies in, man. You make something someone wants, they pay the amount you want to get what they want. That's a little, that's your trade situation. You can use money and monetaries for that and all of that stuff. That's fine. But there is a certain part of life. There is the planet upon which we live, which produces stuff for us so that we can live. And it's a symbiotic relationship between the two of us. We, as humanity, are supposed to take care of her, and she is supposed to take care of us. And so, nobody should be able to profit from that sort of stuff. because the planet should profit from it with us taking care of her. And in turn, that's an exchange where we profit from her because she only benefits from having life grow upon her. That is the whole point to this lovely sphere upon which we find ourselves. Right? And so it would be my plan that food, water, electricity, internet connections, anything at all that has to do with our safety, security, provisions, things that require us to be able to just live and be happy. Our own little square on this planet for us to live in and grow a family and feed that family and take care of it. Now, you're going to ask me questions like, oh, what about overpopulation? What about all this other stuff? And yada, yada, yada. There's a lot involved in that. Yes, there is a lot involved in that. But one of the things, it's one of the reasons why I've been so insanely diligent with working on my scientific paper. Okay, I'll show you a page out of it here in a minute, and maybe the next episode because I got something I got to talk to you about that's out of that. But I've been so crazy about doing that thing because really, what I say doesn't hold a lot of weight without that paper. Like, kind of. It will hold a lot of weight for certain people because we all learn different, and that's what this episode is about. Is about the learning part of the stuff. That's the primer. That's what I'm talking about. We all learn different, and so for me to hand this paper to somebody in the state that it is, like I've been working on it a lot. I'm getting there. It's doing great. But that being said, uh, there's some jargon in there and some lingo and stuff that really only a physicist or someone that's at least interested in the topic would know anything about. So to just hand it to the average Joe, they might not know. But the way that I've come to start structuring it now is I have it in like a tiered system. I remember hearing like a comedian one time talk about the way that they structured their jokes, and that I forget what comedian it was that said this, but they structured their jokes in a way where they would start the joke off having it so that it was funny for everybody in the house and they all laughed, or most people for the most part would laugh. And then he would, further work the joke, like say something else to, that was funny or another joke in that vein, and just whittle it down so that like it became progressively worse to the point where people just less and less people laughed, but when they did, like those were like the sus people that the people that like you know uh should feel bad for laughing at that joke, you know what I mean? So anyways, uh the point to that is I kind of have it structured in that fashion where I have it set up to explain it simply and then create more detail to what I'm telling you. And so this whole topic came up from me watching Kurt Jaimungal's channel, The Theory of Everything. It's a great channel. I highly recommend it. He seems like a great guy, and I'd love to tell him my theory of everything. It'd be sweet to go on his show. But without my paper, I don't expect anyone to have me on any sort of thing. I'm still working. I'll get there, and when that happens, I'd love to do something like that if I was presented the opportunity. Anyways, I'm see with the rambling. There it is again. Anyways, so on Kurt Jaimungal's channel, he had mentioned something about how he doesn't think that the whole saying that Richard Feynman, and I guess it was also attested to Albert Einstein. Excuse me. That goes, if you can't teach something to a 5 year old or 6 year old, I've heard was another one, then you don't understand it well enough yourself. That is not true. And when it comes to my opinion on whether or not that is true, I think there's a lot more that goes into it than whether or not it's like true or false. Um, I think it depends. It's like a situational thing, and I'll explain. So, like I said, we all learn differently. And when you explain something to a 5 year old, which is a great analogy for the discussion, but when you explain something to a 5 year old, in order to get them to understand, you have to explain it to them in a way that lacks fidelity. That is a word for anyone that doesn't know it, that means detail. Something that's high fidelity is high detail. That's why hi fi is a term, an old term, albeit. I think it might be coming back. But, anyways, I digress. The point is that it lacks fidelity. So, when you explain something to a 5 year old, sometimes you might explain it to them in a way that seems whimsical. Perhaps you might explain a moral to them in the form of a story. Um, you know, a way that's easier for them to interpret it and easier for them to grasp the concept of it. They don't get the finer details, but they get the core concept of it. And then when a person becomes more learned and they understand more themselves, then you're able to explain the thing more to those people. One of my favorite things to do is to just go around and try to explain things to all different types of people. Young folks specifically, like little dudes like Quest, my son, man. Those those little people, man, they're sponges. I'll tell you what, they take information real good, and it's in the nature of men, I feel, for us to want to be mentors. Sometimes we like doing that stuff, passing our information on. Uh, it kind of gives us a sense of immortality to be able to, affect things in the future. But, anyways, so what does that mean? Uh, that means that sometimes there's instances where you'll find that things are explained in strange ways, and you'll think that it's fake because of how strange it is. But that's not the case. What the thing is that it lacks fidelity, and it's meant to be more palpable, to hold more information into a smaller package by using symbolism and analogies and things like that in order to, you know, explain a topic. So, all of that being said, part of this is to say this. I got all sorts of books. I like books. I like to read them, and I'll be quoting out of some and showing you guys some, and I'll make sure to try to let you guys all know the title and the author when I pop them up. I'm not sponsored by anything, and I don't plan to be, but you know, you guys can search these books up and check them out if you want during our journey. But one that I refer to often is the Bible. And that's a thing that some people might find problematic. People that really dislike the Bible. It's a big thing out there that people ain't keen on it because, you know, all sorts of reasons. It's the people. Like I said, I think in my previous episode, we are the proof of God's presence, and we're responsible for, not sullying His name by pretending to do things in His name and just being vile, terrible people, which is the tendency of a lot of people. So, because of that, it's gained a bad reputation. But I'd like to explain to you that you should not take it like that, and I'll explain why that is right now. This is the very first of all of the interpretations that we'll be doing. There's a couple quotes I'm going to hit you with, and the first quote is a quote. There's going to be two quotes actually that have to do kind of with the same sort of thing. One is a Nikola Tesla quote, and the other is a Manly P. Hall quote. And people may or may not know these individuals. Manly P. Hall talked a lot about magic and stuff like that, and wrote many books on that sort of topic. Whether or not you believe about that sort of stuff, I think you might have a different opinion about the topic, perhaps after I'm done talking about all the stuff I talk about. But the other person, Tesla, we all, I think should know who that person is. If not, I suggest you Google him, famous inventor. So we'll start with the Tesla one, which I think this is a pretty well-known quote. Let me know if I'm wrong, but it goes, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence." We may have all heard that. So, that's true. That's what a lot of my research is about, and a lot of what we'll be talking about. But let us now go on over to the Manly P. Hall quote, which goes, "When the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. They shall then know truth, and more than that, they shall realize that from the beginning, truth has been in the world unrecognized, save by a small but gradually increasing number appointed by the lords of the dawn as ministers of the needs of human creatures struggling to regain their consciousness of divinity." I wanted to read the whole quote because I didn't want it to be out of context or whatever. Um, because really the part that was relevant was the language of symbolism part at the top. But, obviously people will wonder what some of the rest of what the quote is. So, but anyways, that whole language of symbolism, and I'm going to show you what that means and what I mean by that. And I'm going to show you how that sort of thing is done and explain it to you. So I'm going to use the Bible, and I have a couple books here. I have my art history book from college. I have just an NIV Bible, and I have a textbook, a medical textbook. All right. So, like I said, there's symbolism put in the Bible all over the place. And there's all sorts of stories that, sometimes they seem like, why? Why is that in there? That seems like a silly tale, a silly story to have. And there's a particular instance where there's one. And if you notice, I'm going to point out a couple things. This is just kind of the way that I think when, like, feel like the way that I think is unique. Tell me if it is or if it isn't, but I'm pretty sure uh, that it is because I've gotten comments on it a couple times and a couple comments while we were reading the Bible. I think there was a pastor talking to me one time when during like a counseling session, and I'd mentioned the wording in the Bible and like the way it was written, like it wasn't written like it was the person that was speaking, and kind of questioned something about that. And he said, "That's interesting that you point that out. That's insightful." Whatever. Again, see how I ramble on? There I go. I'm trying to keep this short, so I gotta finish this up. I'm gonna show you how this links. Here we go. So in Genesis, there's a very interesting tale that happens with Jacob, and it's pretty famous story about Jacob wrestles God. Okay, and this is Genesis chapter 13, verse 22. Okay, and here we go. Jacob wrestles with God. That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched, and he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you please me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask me my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. So it's a strange story, right? Like, they say he camped at the side of the river, had a dude stop and wrestle him, and then break his hip, touch his hip, or whatever, and pull it out of the socket or whatever. Uh, and it's kind of like one of those, Aesop fables or something where it's like gets to the bottom of why a certain behavior is done by that group of people. So the Jews don't eat a certain meat because of this story, right? So, where is the symbolism there? Well, the symbolism specifically is in the instance with the location of the injury that occurs to Jacob and the name of the city or the town, Peniel. Okay? That is very similar and very close to the word pineal, which is the gland that is our third eye in the center of our head there that we use to for our imagination and for dreams and things like that. It does all sorts of really cool stuff, but it's our third eye essentially. And so that word And the situation here, I'm going to show you in my medical book right here. I have this part here, and you can look it up, get a picture of the brain if you want to. I have this pink area highlighted to show that this part right there, that is the pineal gland, and that sits inside of your brain, which we can see quite clearly the shape of this brain, right? So you may be wondering to yourself, well, Jeremiah, what the heck does that have to do with Jacob wrestling in the Bible and the injury that he took and all of that, yada yada? Well, in order to do that, we have to take a look at a work by my main man, Michelangelo, from the Renaissance era. And that's what I have my art history book here for. So if we take and look at the image of the creation of Adam, which most of us know is the image on the Sistine Chapel there with the whole finger thing, right? And a lot of people have come to the conclusion and understand that this shape here that's used for the robing that goes around the outside and all of the angels that are in there and God and stuff like that. I'll hold it good for you there so you can take a good decent look at it. That shape is the shape of a brain. Just as you could see in the book that I just showed you. Rewind the tape. I'm not picking it back up. These are big books. Anyways, the point is that if we look really closely at the picture, we see, where is it that God's hip sits in this picture? Now, dang, I forget which one it is. I should probably look that up. But there's a spot in the body, I believe that it's the pineal gland. It's also referred to in some esoteric texts as the seat of God, perhaps, something like that. Anyways, so that right there is just one example of how one would need to do the research, how one would need to get to the bottom of certain information. This isn't like a conspiracy theory sort of crap. This isn't like, thinking that someone hid some stuff and some stuff. People really did hide stuff and stuff because it was common practice. Like, that's the way that it was in certain time periods. So if you're dealing with certain images and imagery, stuff like things from the Renaissance era, things, from medieval times and stuff where they were, some of them, persecuted for the passing on of information and so on and so forth. Like, a lot of that stuff, some of that stuff has been coded. And to really understand the information, you need to decode that information through that symbolism. That's why it is that Manly P. Hall said that stuff. That's why Nikola Tesla said what they said about, about exploring those sorts of things. The things we wouldn't normally explore. Tesla talks about that stuff all the time, about us taking our imagination for granted. And I think that's a part of what's happened with science, is that they take themselves too seriously sometimes, and then there's problems with just, I don't know, they have their own problems. I'm not part of that community as much as I'd like to be. I'm not an academic, so I suppose that's their business. But But I am a learner, a guy that likes to read and learn. And I guess if you want to, you can call me a polymath. This is probably the only thing that I would really. It doesn't mean I'm smart. It means maybe I could win a game show or something someday. I don't know. I don't know. I'm curious, if anything. So if you're curious too and you want to learn more stuff, more about things and how the universe works, in the next couple episodes, I'm going to be talking about the theory and how it works with heaven and hell. And we're going to learn some more stuff about religion and magic and alchemy specifically. It's going to be kind of like an alchemy 101 crash course probably in the next episode, um, to kind of get you guys. I mean, that was the primer. This is what I'm talking about and how we're going to be doing it. This is how we're going to be decoding our alchemy. We're going to be taking and making comparisons and look to see if we can discern what certain coded things are through gathering as much knowledge from as many sources as we can and try to come to figure stuff out. And I feel like if we can do that, then it will give the world definitive answers about things we've had questions about that make us all argue and fight, so that we can stop worrying about and talking about and fighting about that stuff that doesn't matter. Because why fight about a truth? If something is true, why fight about it if it's the way that it is and it's like an unchangeable thing? And we're not even talking about a thing that has to do with feelings, has to do with anything. We're talking about a mechanical operation. Just like how two magnets stick together. Like, why would you fight about that sort of thing and try to, I mean, if something's an inconvenience, you might try to change something in order to make it less painful or not good or something like that. But magnetism, it's a thing that, it's like a tool. It's a thing that we use. It's a thing that the fact that it exists, we use that fact for things, and we adjust and make things based around that fact. We don't try to change that fact so that it doesn't, you know what I mean? I don't know. Anyways, so that's what I feel like we can work on, bringing that stuff together, removing need, and maybe figuring this stuff out, maybe figuring out the science of stuff and how the world works might help us do that. And I don't think by any means that I'm anyone suited to do such a thing whatsoever. In fact, I feel like, if anything, my wisdom lies in knowing that it takes more than just one person. I'm a team based worker and have always been that way. Like, I'm good at leadership, but I don't like leading at all. I prefer to be part of the group, but I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just a better idea man or something. I don't know. I don't know, but hopefully, maybe my ideas might be helpful to people. So if you want to hear more of them, tune in next time, and we'll talk some more about it. Um, I hope this episode wasn't too boring and you kind of liked it. I might edit some of it. I don't think I really paused much in it, so I might not need to, but alright. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I'll talk to you guys all later. See you.